It's me.
All of you know pretty much who he is. Most of you have read a lot of what he's written. You watched his interviews, and we are very honored to have him here in New York. The main reason that I wanted to organize this for him is because when I was growing up, and I'm older than many of you, we were always told that the worst thing that happened in Germany was not what Hitler did, but the fact that Germans never spoke up. And the fact that they then said they didn't know what was going on. And I feel that this is what's happening right now in the world, but it's particularly happening in the United States. So I, in the future, want to know that I spoke up and that I helped other people to speak up. Okay?
Thank you so much, Nita, for sorting it out. It's actually a nice room. I like it. Yeah. If I would be allowed to say what I'm saying in NYU or Columbia University, it would probably mean that I'm part of the establishment. So the fact that you are here with me today, kind of we are hiding basically, only means that the situation in this country is not that different from USSR 1970s. The only difference is that in the Soviet Union, the end of the empire, people realized that they were Yeah, everyone? Yeah, if not, you can, there is more room.
Move the chairs up farther.
Yeah, if you don't hear me, just move to the front. In the Soviet Union, people realized that they were heavily misinformed. So if they would tell you in the morning news that the weather is going to be nice, people realize that there is a storm approaching. And I'm not so sure that this is the situation in the United States. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about, and I even have 3 colors and papers, you know. We have a lot to talk about. I want to launch this talk because I want to leave you enough time to challenge me and so on. In the Jewish ghetto, the European Jewish ghetto, for many hundred years, some people say as many as 1,500 years, they exercised they engaged in a very unique exercise, something that you may call, you are entitled to regard as the eugenic project. They used to marry the merchant daughter, the daughter of the richest Jew in the ghetto. It was always arranged marriage, with the sage, with the boy who was what they called, any Hebrew speakers in the room? Don't be shy. You know, yeah, it's a Jewish city. Rosh Hashanah, everywhere I go, Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, it is what they called Ilui Batorah. The Torah supreme talent, the boy that was destined to be a leading rabbi, leading scholar, leading judge, and so on. They basically created a very, very unique and small class of people who were extremely talented in money and scholarship. It explained a lot. For many years, I came across this notion of the Jewish genius, and I've always been troubled by it, because the amount of Jewish idiots that I encountered along my life was more than enormous. But I also realized that some Jews are uniquely clever, shrewd, they're funny, and they're good in business. It's a fact. And I never understood it. This kind of class division in the Jewish world. But now we start to understand what it was. The more clever this small elite were, the more stupid the Jewish masses became. Because for 1500 years, they were impoverished, they were robbed of talent. Every time we spot a talent, we send him to the best yeshiva. By the way, all the time, the Catholic did exactly the opposite. Every time they spotted a uniquely clever boy, they send him to the church. They told him, girls, forget about it. Boys, maybe. So the Catholic became more stupid. The Jews were extremely clever in building that kind of a unique elite, cognitive elite. We are going to talk a lot about cognitive elite. Now let's try to start to understand what is cognitive elite. Maybe this paper, they're not big enough. Everyone can see it. This is the horizontal axis representing cognitive ability. And these are masses. This is the bell curve. Have you seen the bell curve before? Some of you did. The bell curve is there. It's a representation of the manner in which things are distributed in nature. So if we talk about height, let's say that this is adult male shorter than 4 feet. This is taller than 6.1. Yesterday I realized that I'm 6.1, you know, because I think centimeters. And this is most of us. The same applies to ability. On the left side, on the left, we meet the idiots. No, it's just the left of the bell curve, yeah? Although there are some reason to argue that coincidence, I don't know. In reality, it's the same. We will talk about the left, don't worry. What is left out of the left? The leftover. In the right, we find the very, very clever people, and we are pretty much in the middle. Now, in normal societies, like European societies, traditional European society, aristocracy, elites, looks like that. We have few idiotic aristocrats. Some are clever, most are average. It's basically a bell curve squashed. And why? Because in European society, the title, the aristocracy, was passed to the elder son. Not to the older son, sorry. Not to the most clever son, yes? So, if the older son was stupid, he would be the fon stupido, whatever they call him. The Brits had a problem because they were greedy. They wanted to run an empire, and they realized that they need many, many more clever people. The open aristocracy, through peerage to more talent. They started to grab people from military, from clergy, from civil servants, academia, the arts, Sir Elton John. It's a joke. Yeah? And they created a nice little bump here. This trick made British aristocracy one of the most sufficient cognitive elite. This is why they managed to run an empire. The Ottoman Empire used a very similar trick. They collated talents from different tribes, different ethnicities, Armenians, Muslims, obviously, Kurdish. Their aristocracy look pretty much the same. But when it comes to the Jewish elite, it looks different. We have the bell curve. The Jewish elite looks like that. No stupid, no average, uniquely clever people. Again, clever in scholarship and money. At the same time, the Jewish masses are becoming more and more stupid. We're really talking about cognitive partitioning between the clever, the very clever. By the way, I'm doing it very symbolically. It is very possible that if we would talk about real numbers, it is very possible that the cognitive elite is just here. Okay? But then some of you won't be able to see it. We have a clear division between the uniquely clever people and the stupid. There is something that is even more interesting. In the Jewish world, we see a clear geographic divide between the stupid, the Ostjuden, and the clever. The stupid are in the east. The clever ones are in the west. And why? Every time you identify a very, very clever Jew, what do? You send him to a top yeshiva in the west. This is obviously a generalization. They add some cultural centers in East Europe, like in Lida, in Lithuania, in Warsaw. They add some cultural centers. But we'll see it very soon when it comes, for instance, to Zionism. 5 to 10 extremely uniquely clever Jews are redeeming the Jews in the East, who are pretty much a limited class. In the Jewish world, in the Jewish folklore, you called the Eastern Jew, the Ostjuden, you call them, the Hebrew-speaking, Shoavei Maim and Chotvei Etzim, hewers of wood and drawers of water, people who are only capable of very basic manual work. While in the West, in Germany, we have the Freud, the Einstein, Otto Weininger, Marx. They are all unique people with great rabbinical ancestry. Now, by the way, you have to understand that this unique combination of money and scholarship is very unique for the Jews. Those here who visited good universities, not in New York, because in New York it's basically kind of an extended yeshivas, I guess. Good American universities with American professors probably were quick to find out that many of our Anglo-Saxon or white professors, many of them, not all of them, are uniquely clever in mathematics, physics, philosophy, but they are pretty much totally dysfunctional in everything else. They definitely don't know how to make, how to sell their theories, how to turn them into money. Do you know what I'm talking about? They don't know how to talk to women. Not yet. We have a long way to go before I even you consider the possibility of asking a question. And this is something that we can start to understand. These people, money and scholarship. Marx, he wasn't alone. There was another guy, Engels. But everybody said, I'm a Marxist. Nobody said, I'm an Angelist. Because Marx was slightly better in marketing. Freud and Jung. Jung was way more interesting. Freud, quite incredibly, he's managed to convince all of you that you want to sleep with your mother or father, and you were stupid enough to buy it. I'm sorry about it. I take some responsibility for it, as quite embarrassing. There is no doubt that Freud was better in marketing. He invested actually a lot of energy in suppressing Jung. Let me tell you something else, and I'm going to annoy some of you here, I hope. Noam Chomsky. I really tried to dig into Noam Chomsky's work, and I found nothing. Nothing. Uniquely boring, which is, as far as I'm aware, is much bigger crime. Boredom is a disaster. Then the man has never inspired me to think. It's an anti-intellectual. He's an anti-intellectual. An intellectual is a person who inspires you to think on your own. Noam Chomsky and his acolyte or disciples, they try to tell you what to think and how to think. It's the correctness model. It's the correct thinking. Colonialism, it's horrible. It's awful. But in spite of him being so lame and boring, he's very good in marketing. And guess what? I'm also very good in marketing. You all come to see me. Thank you. All right? So it's not just that I find a lot of those symptoms in my own activity, in my own personality, and so on and so on and so on. When you start to understand this cognitive divide, you may be able to start to understand what is Zionism. As I mentioned, Zionism, 5 to 10 very clever Jews. Herzl from Vienna. Nordau from Switzerland. Where was Nordau from? I don't remember. Yeah? Definitely not an Ost student. Jabotinsky, he is from Russia, but definitely supreme elite. They decide to redeem those people who live here in the East. Jewish humor, quite witty, isn't it? There is no such a thing as Jewish humor. Jewish humor is actually Yiddish humor. Yiddish humor. If you think that Freud or Einstein were walking around the street cracking Jewish jokes, you are wrong. They didn't. Even Chomsky cannot tell Jewish jokes. I will be surprised if he can understand Jewish jokes. Jewish jokes are Yiddish jokes. It's the jokes of the people in the East, the oppressed, the outcast, who try to bridge this divide, pretending to be extremely clever. In the Yiddish humor, the Jews always come on top. But in reality, I'm talking about 19th century, we can talk about 20th century Yiddish humor. This symptom that you have to deal with is the complete opposite. It's very interesting to compare Yiddish humor 19th century with Woody Allen, you know, the clumsy Jew. You know, how they own their symptoms, then they hope that, it's very interesting. But Yiddish humor is there, the means in which the limited, the dull Jew bonds with the very, very clever brothers and sisters in Frankfurt, Berlin, and so on. I'll give you 2 Jewish jokes so you understand what is happening here. In a city in Poland with no Jews. City in Poland with no Jews at all. Every Sunday we have a very dirty, very poor clochard, beggar, a tramp, rabbi with beard, and he's kind of every Sunday he's kind of crying for money, and he doesn't collect a penny, a cent, a dime. And near to him there is a very, very, very clean, with a white shirt, blonde, blue eyes, almost Aryan, goy with a crucifix, beggar, and the Christian guy is making millions. And the Jews suffer from abuse, and people come and spit on him, and it's a disaster. One day, the priest decides that he cannot take it anymore because it's Sunday. They go, they spit on the Jew, then they come to the church. It's not right. He goes to the Jewish beggar and tells him, listen, Moshe, look, you come here every week. You don't make a penny. Look at the Christian guy. He makes millions. Just don't come here. It's not good for you. It's not good for us. The rabbi looks at the priest. He then looks at the Christian and he tells him, listen, he's telling me in Yiddish, Yosef, you see, this priest is trying to teach us about marketing. The Jew, the beggar, the underclass comes on top. But in reality, it was the opposite. They were uniquely oppressed in the Pale area. Another joke, filthy joke, politically incorrect, but it's kosher because it is Jewish. Do you know what is a pogrom? A pogrom is when the goy says enough is enough. There is a pogrom in Ukraine, in a small Jewish village, a shtetl. These Cossacks coming on the horses, they have vodka. First thing, they kill all the men, then the boys, then they start to rape the women. It's awful, it's a disaster. They rape and the young women, and after 3 hours they had enough and they start to look for gold. And they look for gold and they don't find anything, and they move to the first floor and they don't find anything, to the second floor, to the third floor. They start to get upset. It's already 6 o'clock. They have to go back to their own village. And then once they get to the attic, they find the old granny, and she's 95 years old. She's senile. She looks horribly bad. But you know, these Cossacks, they didn't rape now for 6 hours. They're still a bit drunk. They decide to have another go. They take off their clothes and they start to shout, and the mothers, the women from downstairs, they shout, oh, we will give you the gold. Oi, oi. You know, oi is a very expressive thing in Jew. We will give you everything. Leave our granny. And the granny is very upset upstairs. She shouts, a pogrom is a pogrom. In the Yiddish humor, the Jew always comes on top. It's a phantasmic reality. Interesting. Let's now try to understand what I'm doing here today. I'm trying to give you a tool that will help you to understand the social environment in which we live. So I kind of look at few societies. We cover the Jews. We even managed to shove in a good Jewish joke, you know. Let's look at Palestine. Even Palestine has a bell curve, you see? Beautiful bell curve. The Palestinian aristocracy looks exactly the same as European aristocracy. Some idiotic Palestinian aristocrats or elite, some very clever, and so on. But there is another thing that we know about Palestine. Palestine has been conquered for quite a few years. Actually 2,000 years, more than 2,000 years. Some historians count as many as 70 different conquerors in Palestine. What is the role of elite in Palestine, in a conquered society? To acquiesce, to serve the conqueror, to put the people in line. It's a subservient, 2,000 years of subservient aristocracy. Now we start to understand maybe why for 100 years nothing good happened in Palestine. The Palestinian elite, sometimes they try to fight. By the way, when they try to fight, what is the Israeli or the Zionist method to deal with Palestinian resistance? How do they call it? Focus assassination. Who are the people that they take out in the focus assassination? The elite. If you look at the list of the Palestinians that were assassinated, murdered, blah, 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 by Israel, Israel is very precise. They take out cognitive elite because they understand the importance of cognitive elite. But this bell curve of Palestinian subservient elite explain to us why nothing really happens in Palestine and why the Palestinian elite in the diaspora is the first to take money from George Soros and other sources. They are there to put their own people in line. And the meaning of it is that they achieve nothing. Now, I do believe that many of you who are Palestinian supporters are actually very critical of Mahmoud Abbas. But let me tell you, Mahmoud Abbas is actually a genius, because he realized that if this is how the Jewish elite look like, and this is how the Palestinian elite looks like, the Palestinians don't stand a chance. Because even if they manage to win in the battle, they wouldn't have somebody that would combat AIPAC in America. And even if they manage to build a lobby, they have to do something to take American TV, American media, Hollywood. And he said, I don't want a single Palestinian kid to die in this idiotic war. Our war will be won over time. Demography is the Palestinian bomb. This is his philosophy. I'm not a Palestinian. It's not down to me to say whether he is right or is wrong. At least, unlike many other Palestinians that speak big words about resistance, at least he is honest enough which is a rare quality in modern politics. And now I'm going to contradict myself. So I just said that Palestinians are useless and cannot raise a proper elite. By the way, it's not the Palestinian fault that their elite is subservient. But look what happened in the last 3 months, in the last 4 months in Gaza. This is incredible. There is no doubt that the Israeli army, Israeli Air Force, IDF, are militarily superior, advanced in weaponry, tactics, and they were defeated, humiliated in Gaza by a very small military force. How did it happen? How did it happen? I just argued that Palestinians cannot have elite. It is very simple. If I lock this room now, put NYPD around us, I leave this room with a few pita bread and a bit of hummus, it will take us 2 hours to find out who is the most charismatic person in this room, who is the most clever person in the room, who is the most assertive, who is kind of happy, kind of physically to engage. This is the law of the prison. By turning Palestine into a prison, they pushed the Palestinians into a completely new social order, and the Palestinians were extremely clever. Through the Islamic education, they developed elite. By the way, you can develop elite eugenically, and you can develop elite through IQ test. I can take this room, run an IQ test. Everyone over 150 is going to further education. There are many ways to do it. This is what they did in Palestine in the 10 years. Through Islamic education, they realized, they found out who is very advanced academically, who is very spiritually uplifting Islamically, who is more physically inclined to encounter. It was a very, very sophisticated system, and look at Palestine. Rockets, drones, this tunnel system. I don't know if you know, but you know that there was now an issue between Britain and Scotland. The Scottish, they saw that they were about to win independence. They already kind of asked from Palestinians to come over to dig the tunnels under England, you know. No. I make it up. But if you want to improve your underground, your subway system in New York, the Palestinians know how to do it. Okay? So we can see that cognitive elite and the building of cognitive elite is a flexible term, it's a dynamic term, it is something that can change. You can have a society that is engaged in 2,000 years of social practice, and then in just few years it is twisted. Let's talk about you guys. America. One 100 years ago, your WASP elite looked pretty much like that. And you were a very, very diverse and mixed society. In other words, along the assembly line in Ford factory, you could have a very limited person standing just side by side with the most clever people on this planet. There was a lot of need for labor, And people realized that if you work, you can support a family. But America, 2014, looks like that. Miraculously, you have managed to copy the cognitive partitioning of the Jewish ghetto. How did it happen to you? It's a disaster. It's a disaster because it is very difficult to close this gap. How did it happen to you? I'm happy to discuss it with you. But what I think that led towards this very problematic partitioning, basically we have some very, very clever people, and we have people who used to be working class, now they are workless class, and they are becoming underclass, more and more people becoming underclass, and there are millions, tens of millions in your country. And each of you can find himself here, because this is moving to the right. At a certain stage in your history, you decided, not you, somebody decided on your behalf to give up on production. You have become a service economy. Who was the greatest preacher of free market and service economy? Milton Friedman. A guy called Milton Friedman. And he didn't do it because he was a conspiratorial guy. He really believed in it. And he had good reason to believe. Milton Friedman was a very dedicated Jew and a Zionist. In my book, The Wandering, who I dedicated a chapter for him because he gave a beautiful talk in Hillel Institute talking about Jews and capitalism, Jews and free market. And for Jews, service economy is what they do for 2,000 years. They're never getting involved in production. In fact, Zionism was there to change it. This is very interesting. We always like to look down on Zionism, but early Zionism was there to change. The Zionists admitted there was a clear problem in Jewish culture. They said, we are a bunch of usurer capitalists. Ber Borchov said, every society looks like that. We have a lot of working class, a lot of people working in production, few doctors, lawyers, and few bourgeoisies. They said, Jewish society look like that. Maybe we have one guy, by mistake, he went to work in factory. We have a lot of lawyers, and all the rest are in Wall Street. Zionism said, it's not our fault. This is something clever about Jews. Oh, it's never our fault. It's always the goyim's fault. But they said, but we are going to change it. It all happened because we don't have a state. Once we have a state, we will become a normal society. We will change it. And it was true. They went to Palestine. They started to work on the land. They built factories for almost 2 weeks. And then they found out that the Palestinians were cheaper. And this is probably the end of it. So Zionism, at least ideologically, early Zionism, is a very interesting moment in Jewish history. It's a unique moment where the Jews are owning their problems, admitting their problems. In my book, you can read some Zionist quotes, and if you wouldn't know that they were written by Zionists, you would believe that they were written by Hitler, Goering, whatever. or Gilad Atzmon, but no. Okay? Milton Friedman managed to convince not just your government, not just Reagan, also Margaret Thatcher, that we can operate as a service economy. The creation of service economy led to the annihilation of your production, manufacturing, and created a great demand for liability. This led to the rise, the only industry in this country, I think, is university, academia industry. They are selling you the image, the fantasy of being abled. So you go to university, you pay 55 or 60 or 40, or I don't know, 40,000 bucks a year, with the hope that you may find your place here. And usually, by the way, it doesn't work. Because they don't need a lot. They really need people. They don't need your paper. They don't need your diploma. They need you to be clever and brutal. By the way, a lot of those ideas, the idea that of looking at society partitioned, or the structure of cognitive abilities, is not my invention. There was probably the most advanced American social scientist who thought about it and published a book about it in the 90s. His name was Richard Ernstein. He, in 94, told the American people, you are marching towards a disaster. Now, anything that I said here is really overwhelmingly worrying. You probably agree with, it's pretty simple. It's common sense. Richard Ernstein was denounced and abused and harassed by the so-called left because, and this is very problematic, what he said, but I'll let you judge. It's not Gilad Atzmon now, this is Richard Ernstein. He said that when we look at the American society, this is the bell curve of, let's say, the white person, the white population with 115 average IQ. He liked to talk about IQ. This is another issue that could be problematic. I don't want to go into it, but you have to understand the principle of what he said, and then to judge whether you agree with him or not. He said, this is the case, 115. IQ, by the way, you know, those who are cynical about IQ would argue that IQ, the only thing that IQ judges is your ability to get a high IQ, to score an IQ number in the test. But what Richard Ernstein said is that IQ actually measures your adaptability. So if you take a mathematician who works for a Wall Street company doing very complicated algorithms, he has 175 IQ, and you put him in the jungle, he may score in the jungle IQ 55. Complete idiot. He will probably be killed within 2 hours. All right? The example that Ernstein gives, he said, if you take two identical grains of wheat and you plant one in the Sahara and one in California, you see what is adaptability. He said the white American is 115. The Oriental, sorry, it's supposed to be the same height. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. The Oriental and the Japanese, the Oriental and the Jews are 125. The Oriental, it's average, yeah? It doesn't mean that every Japanese or Jew is more clever. He said the average for Oriental and Japanese, Oriental and Jews, I mean Japanese, Korean, is 125, and he actually argued that it's very different IQ. Jews, for instance, are very good verbally. Japanese are more stronger on mathematics, because in the ghetto we didn't need a lot of mathematics. You know, it's shekel. It's not that complicated. Yeah? Nobody gave Ernstein problem for suggesting that the Jews are more clever. Okay? He survived. But then he said, if you look at black and Hispanics, it's not Gilad Atzmon, it's Ernstein. If you look at black and Hispanics, the bell curve looks like that, with 10 down from the white average. Now, I don't argue. I'm not going to argue with whether these numbers are right. Again, this is not me. But look at something quite terrifying. If we now look at America cognitive elite, I needed another color, and the underclass, what do you see? You see, the Jews are overwhelmingly overrepresented in the cognitive elite of America, which is exactly what you see in your politics, in your Hollywood, in your media. And black and Hispanics are pushed into the underclass. So whether Einstein was right or was wrong, I leave it for you to judge. Maybe his model is completely wrong, but the prediction is fucking, you have to tuck the fucking out of there. Spot on. Spot on. And the lefty organizations that silenced his study actually are responsible for millions, tens of millions of Americans who are living in total deprivation. Total deprivation, and don't see a prospect of better future. Now, I'm very clumsy. It may take me hours now. Let me try to do it. Okay. And now, you know this song? And now we are going to talk about my favorite topic, the left. Contemporary left. Bell curve. America is now broken into two societies. Cognitive elite, and in practice the cognitive elite, let's face it, it's really, they're very, very clever, and there are not that many. There are some people here that are involved in the occupation movement. You call them 1% and 99. Yeah? Now you understand what it is. In the old days, we had real, genuine left. Why? Because left is labor-oriented notion. The left was the voice of the working class, because there was work. So simple. When there was work, there was left that was representing the worker. And there was kind of an hierarchy, you know, so there will be kind of a gathering, and you still recognize that this guy is really charismatic and he represents, I don't know, the workers of General Dynamics or Boeing or whatever, and he would start to move up and he will get to the unions. There was some sense in this game. But our left nowadays is quite strange, because there is no work. The left in the West, not just in America, are uniquely average people. There are a bunch of delusional collective, and why do I say that they are here? If they were here, they wouldn't have time to be left. They would make money, and a lot of it. So they cannot be here. If they would be here, where they should be, nobody would notice them. Nobody cares what happened in the most deprived, segregated neighborhoods of Detroit or New Jersey. So the left is here. And now we are going to witness the greatest political betrayal of modern time. The people here, the elite, they're usually very clever. No, they're always very clever, but they're usually very liberal and nice. They are against immigration. Sorry, they're pro-immigration. They're pro-immigration. They are against injustice, racial discrimination, gender discrimination. They're really nice people. And guess what? These unique average people, namely the left, are also pro-immigration, against discrimination, gender discrimination, racial discrimination. Shockingly enough, the left that traditionally was there to criticize the elite, the left that traditionally was there to criticize the elite, is now supported by the elite because they believe in the same thing. And there is a guy called George Soros, and he has the Open Society Institute, and the Open Society Institute supports every left progressive organization, not just in America, but all over the world. Because what we see here is not real left, is a controlled opposition. Pretty devastating, isn't it? You have to do something now to cheer me up. To accept Gilad, you hit the nail. So it's not that the left is a wrong concept. It's what is left out of the left. Now, what's the time?
9 o'clock.
Great. I'm coming to the end of. Usually I take kind of quite a few hours to explain it all, but I try to rush through it. How did it happen to the left? How did it happen to the left that it was hijacked and was turned into a control opposition? And I guess that most people in the room here today, because they know that I'm the one who speaks about it. Once upon a time, you were a collective of Americans. Some of you were rich, some of you were poor. Many of you were middle class. And the left ideology was very simple. If you are a worker, it doesn't matter if you are a man, a woman, black, Jew, Indian, gay, LGBT. We didn't have it. We were one. And it was quite exciting. But then something happened, and I don't want to extend the talk about it, but if there will be if question may rise, you know, I'll elaborate. It's basically a project that I identify with the invasive work of Frankfurt School. We decided to slice society into identity groups. Instead of being one, we start to talk about identities. The gay, the woman, the black, the Muslim, and each group had its own oppressor. The women are oppressed by the male chauvinists, the black is oppressed by the white supremacists. And it's all kind of quite theoretical. Because, you know, I've been with quite a few women. It's hard to believe, you know, because I'm fat and stuff like that. But it must be because of my intellectual, because they think that I'm a clever Jew, maybe, you know. Yeah, so it's not because of my physicality, but you know, I never never come across a woman that kind of was very concerned by my chauvinism. Actually, this is what they like about me, you know. And I'm a jazz musician, and I play with a lot of black people, and they are definitely subject to discrimination, no doubt about it. But I never heard them complaining, you know, you live in New York and you play with about the white supremacists. No, they made they meet supremacy every day. It's not the Ku Klux Klan that chased them in New York. It's sometimes even their own people who are just working for the NYPD and so on. So we have a lot of sectarian wars. The gays with the Muslim with the Islamophobes, and the Jews with everyone. And all that time, we have these sectarian wars. We forgot what are the most important issues. What is the most important issues in a society? Work, jobs, health, and education. Instead of being concerned with the three most important things, we are engaged in endless discussion about gay marriage. Now, I don't have any problem with gay marriage, but I don't think that it's the most crucial national issue. It's a marginal issue. Anti-Semitism, whether it is there or not, it's a marginal issue. We put the marginal topics at the front, and all that time, instead of working for labor, it was the left that created a segregated ideology and facilitated the invasion of big money, cooperates, and globalization. And you cannot talk about it. And you don't know what to do about it. And why? Because one of the first things that they did to you they imposed political correctness. Political correctness is the cement that facilitates the transformation of your American collective into isolated margins.
And they're teaching this in the public schools.
For sure.
Political correctness.
I need just 2 minutes before. Man, you can bring the bass and we play then one tune and then we open with 4 questions. What is political correctness? Political correctness is politics that doesn't allow political criticism. This is what political correctness. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the definition of dictatorship. Dictatorship is politics that doesn't allow political dissent. No. Dictatorship is nice in comparison to political correctness. Because in dictatorship, you can go to the pub, we can meet in this room, and then, listen, I really, really don't like Obama. This is fine. You can even get away with it. But in the case of political correctness, it is you, yourself, who silence your dissent. It's a self-suppression that turned you into a bunch of impotence, intellectual impotence. You cannot even articulate your dissent.
Because then you'll be racist or whatever.
Because you may even see yourself as a racist and you cannot cope with it. It is very, very clever. And what I think that we are going to do now, in case you didn't know, I'm a full-time musician. The rebel is just something that and I have Ben with me, is a great bass player. What I'll do now, I'll play a short tune to let you think about, and maybe you, because it will be very loud. It will be very loud. Just you will okay. I'll play one tune, and what shall we play? I don't know. Let's play. I always do it in these kind of gatherings. What a wonderful world. Okay. Yeah. What a wonderful world, huh? It sounds nostalgic, isn't it? Okay, start to attack. Now,
Latin.
Yeah.
And what about like Beethoven, Bach, Verdi, Vivaldi, Michelangelo? I mean, the Jews have never produced any great.
This is great. We all the time, I mentioned it many times, Jews were very, very good in scholarship and money. Philosophers, we don't have great Jewish philosophers. We have pretenders. Chomsky. Spinoza is a very unique character. By the way, look at Spinoza. Spinoza has nothing to do with this. Spinoza is a Sephardi Jew. He has nothing to do with this cognitive elite, with this Jewish European cognitive elite. And by the way, it's interesting for another reason. Because who are the greatest Jews, really, when you think about it? Jesus? Spinoza? Even Marx? They're all self-haters. The greatest Jews, self-haters. Jews who didn't like. Now we don't have Jewish great composers. Mendelssohn is a composer, he's not a great composer. We cannot put him in Bach. You know? There are a lot of, and by the way, and mathematicians and physicists. The Jews started to contribute to science. Emancipation, entering German universities. It's nothing that ever happened in the Jewish ghetto. We don't have a nuclear physicist coming from a yeshiva. All right? So you're right, you're absolutely right about it. I was very precise. They're very, very good in money and very certain kind of scholarship. Talmudic scholarship. If you tell me that the mother is belonging to the desert, the father is coming from Warsaw, this is the kind of, they're very clever. They will come. So should I be able to eat matzah in Yom Kippur if the... It's very sophisticated, but not major contribution to humanity.
One more thing. The 125 and the variation there, I'm just like in a small little microcosm that I traveled in New York.
Yep.
My experience working in like very high-end media is that I work with a lot of mediocrities.
A lot of?
Mediocrities, and they get ahead because they're Jewish. Not because they are smarter than other people, but because of the tribal nepotism. And that's what I see all over the place. So I'm kind of a little bit...
You are right. Now...
confidence that comes from thinking I'm chosen, so I have the right...
Did you read this book?
I didn't. Sorry.
I also didn't read it. I just write it. People told me if you read it, maybe you decide to... Anyway, because I don't believe in blood and race and all this kind of... Anyway, Jews are not race even. My initial approach to it, and this is what I did for 10, 12 years, was to decode the cultural, tribal aspects that explain what you're saying. For sure, you're right. On top of all of that, on top of cognitive elite, we are dealing with a uniquely exilic tribal culture with a very strong kinship, for sure. I published this book, a lot of controversy. Until now, by the way, I've never seen any criticism of this book. They just tell me they want to burn it, and then I realized that it's actually deeper. What we are talking here, we are not talking about race. Jews are not a race. They're racist sometimes, most of the time. Yeah, the Jewish politics, Jewish identity is racist. But Jews are not a race. But this is something normal. You know, even when you talk about Nazi Germany, there was a racist inclination, but Germans not necessarily a race. They're a combination of races. So we are not talking up here about race. but we definitely talk about biology. We talk about biology, about a eugenic project. By the way, there is nothing wrong in the way they build their demography and social, the way they practice with this social exercise. There are a few Jews in the room that will be able to confirm what I'm saying, if they know enough about Jewish history. In the Jewish world, you remember we had the East, where was the East? Yeah, here. The low-class Jews, the hewers of wood are here, the very clever are here. All the way through the Jewish history, they send clever Jews, the best rabbis, back to the East, to the cheder, to the yeshivas, to teach. Now, this is the meritocracy. I didn't mention this word. Jewish world was a meritocracy. What is a meritocracy? There could be a positive understanding of meritocracy. You put the right people in the right position. If America had the right people in the right position, maybe the situation would be different. You could save yourself. So Jews created, along their history, created a cognitive elite, but they made sure that the cognitive elite is going back to the lower classes, to the East, and provide education. This is something that the American government, for instance, is not doing for Detroit, Baltimore, Oakland, your deprived society. They are left behind, and the prospect of better for future for them, or any future, is diminishing by the second. All right?
I hate to change the subject, but I have a question about Zionism, actually, and perhaps marketing, which you say this is a very good prospect. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the raison d'etre, or the biggest marketing point about Zionism, is that Zionists are there to save the world's Jews from basically the Nazis, or the next pogrom, as typified by the Nazis.
Yeah.
Then there's this history about Zionist collaboration with Nazis. If you start to look at this, it's anti-Semitic. You can't think about it. You can't look at it. Now, the Nazis have been resurrected in the Ukraine. After being entombed from Nuremberg and from 48, now all of a sudden the tomb is open and they're flying out all over the Ukraine. I don't see the ADL complaining about this too much. My last point is, who opened the tomb but neocon Zionists? So what's this?
We have some. Okay. You have to understand a bit about. You will read my book. I know where it is. It's in your car. I put it there. You have to understand a bit about Jewish culture to grasp that there is nothing special about the Nazis. For the Jews, they have the notion of Amalek. Anyone here familiar with the notion of Amalek? Amalek is an arch stereotypical Jew hater. And every generation we create the Amalek. All right? So in the Bible we have few Amaleks, and then if you read Bernard Lazare, you will find out the Jews have been expelled for so many cities, and this was written in late 19th century, before the Holocaust. Every few years you find out the Jews have Amalek. Now, since the Nazis, Yasser Arafat was Amalek, Ahmadinejad is Amalek. Just now, what was it, in Uruguay, in South America, where was it? Kind of a community of Jews were expelled from a city. Where was it? In Guatemala. It's incredible. This is a big topic. Why it happens? Bernard Lazare says, because we are uniquely supremacists. I actually developed it, and I believe that we strive by negation. You see? You are American. I ask you, why you are American, of different kind of origin or whatever, we can start to talk about it. To be identified as an Orthodox Jew is quite easy. You're identified as an Orthodox Jew because you believe in the Torah. But when you have all these idiotic Jews who stand up in kind of left gathering and say, as a Jew, I believe as a Jew. Are you an Orthodox Jew? Do you believe in the Torah? No, I'm an atheist cosmopolitan. So what do you mean when you talk as a Jew? And there is very little to support it. And it usually comes to culinary aspects, chicken soup and matzah ball, which is fine. I tried, when I have flu, I definitely take chicken soup, but chicken soup is not a political argument. You're not going to solve the Palestinian problem with chicken soup, not even with matzah balls. Unless they are uranium depleted. All right? There is no Jewish secular identity, and this is why we need the anti-Semite. The anti-Semite is there to fill the lack of authenticity. You mentioned to me an idiotic friend of you who didn't come today because he didn't have chicken soup, he had the flu, it's a long argument. It is one of my opponents, and he said, all I'm afraid of, he's a secular Jew, he's not religious, he's afraid of the rise of anti-Semitism. Let me shock you. There is nothing better for Jews than anti-Semitism. And you know why? Because anti-Semitism was there to restrain the Jew. Now, due to political correctness, we are so afraid to criticize the Jew that talk about the Holocaust, to look into the war. Why? Why it happens? Why it happens to Jews all the time? And AIPAC is becoming stronger and stronger, and they're bragging about the fact that they own Hollywood. In every week I read about another Jew, so Hollywood is ours. And Chaim Saban is in Israel in a Mossad conference what it takes to take over America, by the politician, control the media. If there was a fear of anti-Semitism, would they dare doing it? No. So anti-Semitism was there to save the Jews. I tell you something more frightening. Ladies and gentlemen, rabbinical Jews, Orthodox Jews, Hasidim, never been involved in any genocidal attack on other people. It wasn't the rabbinical Jews. Late 18th century, middle 19th century, we have emancipation, and then we have Jews flooding the political system. By the way, now we understand why. They are uniquely clever. Once Jews were emancipated in Europe, it took them 10 to 20 years to take over academia, political institutions, medical schools. Not all Jews, just a very clever one, but they were uniquely clever. In the 20th century, I can see that I'm starting to meet some resistance. It's good. In the 20th century, I don't let you talk yet, said, because what I'm going to say now is going to annoy you. You may even leave the room. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bolshevik Revolution was a Jewish revolution. The Holodomor was a Jewish secular crime. The great Yuri Slezkin, one of the best historians in this country, says it. Jews were Stalin willing executioners. They were not Orthodox Jews. They were not religious Jews. They were secular, cosmopolitan. This happened in the early 30s. Beria, Yagoda. 1936, every American liberal Jew is proud of the Jewish involvement in the civil rights, we'll talk about the civil rights movement in a second, in the Spanish Civil War. Go and read about the Spanish Civil War. I started to dig into it last year. The International Brigade in Spain. International Brigade. It was supposed to be a brigade of working class from all over the world. Quarter were Jews. The lingua de franca was Yiddish. Oi, Moshe, let's go and burn this Catholic church. They burned thousands of Catholic churches. These were not Orthodox Jews. These were the Jewish Marxists. 1948, it wasn't rabbis. It was the salt of the Zionist movement, the socialist Zionists, who expelled 3/4 of the Palestinians. There is something uniquely dangerous in the Jewish left. Much more dangerous than Zionism. Because I want to tell you, I want to finalize it with a very, very important observation by me. It's one of my most important observations. Ladies and gentlemen, what is Jewish power? Jewish power is not AIPAC. AIPAC is a symptom of Jewish power, not controlling Hollywood. It is a symptom of Jewish power. Jewish power, ladies and gentlemen, is the capacity to stop you from questioning what Jewish power is. And this is taken care by the Jewish left. By the Chomskys, who are telling us what to think, how to say what to think. JVP, Jews' Voice for Peace. Mondowise, which is one of the biggest Palestinian outlets, changed 2 years ago the comment policy and ruled out any comment. They don't allow any comment that examine or refers to the Jewishness of the Jewish state. How devastating it is. This is not AIPAC. This is not the hardcore Zionists. This is the Jewish left. Jewish left is not the solution. It is the core of the problem. It is true that the Ostjuden were not very interested in Zionism in the beginning. And it is true that they became more interested in Zionism in 1967. Norman Finkelstein, whom I respect, and by the way, it's not mutual. He hates me as much as I respect him. He's obviously a unique scholar, which is something that is very, very rare in the Palestinian solidarity movement, because in the last 20, 30 years, we have managed to expel and reject every person with IQ more than 120. And you were a friend of Israel Shachak.
Yeah.
When I joined this movement, it was just the waves of resentment toward Israel Shachak that pointed at the problem that was inherent to Judaism, you know? Anyway, Norman is a unique scholar, but he's totally wrong on that issue. Why? Because once we understand the structure here, Jewish elite, underclass. It doesn't matter what the Jews, the Jewish masses think. If they support Zionism, they don't support Zionism. You know, whether Finkelstein is right, that the Jewish masses in America are now drifting away from Zionism. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what the Jewish elite think. Zionism is an elite project. The only thing that matters is where George Soros puts his money. Get used to it. Get used to think in these terms. I know that there are a lot of 9/11 and September 11th truthers in this room. One of the reasons that you don't get farther with this discourse is not because you are wrong about your instinct that the story stinks from every possible corner. Because you don't manage to identify the significance of 9/11 in terms of cognitive elite. What is 9/11? What is the product? These people are very good in reducing things into money. That's what they do. You know, they come with an idea, a computer, what we can do with computer, iPod, Schmipod, Guypod, Zypod. 9/11, a lot of money. Wars, X-rays in every airport. Patriot, what do you call it? Patriot Act. All right? In the case of Zionism, whether the Jews moving in, moving out, not interesting. I want to share with you one very interesting insight that is quite embarrassing. I've been in a city, I did kind of quite an extensive tour of concerts and talks. And in one of the cities, the guy who brought me to town told me, Gilad, I really want to understand something. Here, in this town, we had something like 10% of the population was Jewish for very many years. And it was pretty much solid. In the last 2 years, it's popped out to 20, maybe 25. Why all these Jews coming here? What happened? Why this kind of unique mobility? And so it's unlikely that so many Jews would come to your city. And I realized that what we see in America now, which is something that nobody speaks about it yet, something that nobody speaks about yet, is a lot of people in America start to realize that being a Jew is a lot of fun. As you mentioned, there is this clannish thing if you want to get a job or whatever, if there are some Jews in the board. Yeah?
Against non-Jews.
Now, for many years, Jews didn't take anyone in. But now all your Reformed synagogues say, oh, your wife, you bring her on Friday or Saturday and she's in. A lot of people, 12% Jews, 25% Jews, now start to identify as Jews. When this book came out, the Village Voice were interested in me. They took me for a dinner with few of their best, kind of most promising journalists. They knew that I was kind of Israeli by origin, or blah, 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 or Jew. And on the way to the restaurant, they were all Jews. Oh, my grandmother, she's Jewish. I love to eat gefilte fish. By the time we start to eat, they realized that I have a lot of problems with Jewishness, with Jewish politics. By the way we went back, no one in the car was a Jew anymore. All right? So at the moment, Finkelstein may think that a lot of Jews drifting in, but the amount, drifting out, the amount of Jews, of American people, hardly Jewish, who now identify as Jews is growing, and it is quite frightening. Why? Why? Because for American people to have a community of 1.9 supremacist, exclusivist, racist, it's fun, it's esoteric. Majnun, you think in Arabic, yeah? They are crazy. By the time there will be 15%. People who identify with the most exclusivist, brutal aspect of Jewish secular identity, you may have real anti-Semitism, serious. And I realized that this is exactly what happened in Germany in the 1920s. The Reform synagogue is a German invention. They took everyone in. A lot of Germans started to identify with Jewishness, and for the first time I understood where the Nazi, I don't justify, I understood where the Nazi racial policy came from. I never understood why Hitler would go and take a wife of a half Jew and would treat her so badly. I realized because they identify with Jewishness. Or maybe not, but this was the fear. So, again, the idea that Jews have become a very powerful society in America is actually becoming extremely dangerous.
What is wrong here that this elite is not acting?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. Beautiful question. To start with, the fact that some information is available on right-wing websites doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't mean that it is wrong. Truth is beyond, truth has something to do with correspondence rules. Nothing to do with the political affiliation. Now, there is nothing wrong in building cognitive elite. It served the Jews. I spoke about Palestine, about Gaza. They built cognitive elite in the last 10 years. They won the war. Good for them. How many Palestinians in the room? Good for them. Shia.
In what way? When you say
30% of the Israelis, according to some polls, said that they want to leave Israel. This is the beginning of the march to Jerusalem. You know, we can do JVP and solidarity and go to do to this masturbation with activism and all that stuff, but 3 rockets on Tel Aviv. Yeah.
You don't think it's going to get to the point where there's 1 million Jews in Israel and 12 million Palestinians, and still the Jews would be...
By the way, this is a good point, and we'll talk about it. More than that, Shia Muslims is all built on cognitive elite, while the Sunni societies usually looks like that. In the case of Shia Muslims, look at Iran. Ahmadinejad was taken from poverty to the top. When I was in Lebanon, I was shocked to find out that Sheikh Nasrallah was a combatant. He was a soldier. They saw how charismatic he was, how clever. And the Israelis and the Americans, they don't manage to cope this Shia. There is nothing wrong in building cognitive elite. The problem in America is that your cognitive elite, as opposed to your old WASP elite, is committed to itself. It adopted the Latin American model rather than moving society forward. They move themselves forward. Complete negligence of society as a collective. This is the problem. And this is typical to the Jewish world. I'll prove it to you. 1 minute, I'll prove it to you. How many Rothschild died in the Holocaust? One. One. You know why? She was exactly a Rothschild. She was a Goya, she was a Shikse, she was a Gentile who married the Rothschild. He left her behind. He went. All right?
I just want to point out that this self-interest that the elite has is clearly not the long-term interest of the society which they get their power base from. Right? If they can take this from 2 or 3 generations, 4 generations, their power base is gone.
They don't care, they move on.
They can't move on to Asia.
Do you listen to yourself? Do you read the news? The whole idea of capitalist society was capitalist, that we take less taxes from the rich. And why? Because they invested in society. But this is gone now. In globalization, they make money here, they invest it in Asia. What are you on about? This is the whole idea. These people are, let me say it, it's so simple. In the old days, we were productive human beings. Some of us made music, some other people made cars, toilet seats. We would wake up in the morning, we would do something along the day, and we come home, we know that we have bread and butter, but we did something. Our transition into a service economy turned us into consumers. While the role of the politician in the old days was to produce jobs, he will come to town and tell you, listen, I come to Manhattan and I promise you that if you put me in, I provide you with 40,000 jobs in the first year. The role of the politician now is to facilitate consumption. This all they do. We have been reduced into consumers. What makes a person into an underclass? Very easy to define. The underclass are the people who cannot consume. And more people cannot consume. So, society, your society, is in a very bad way. And it's not just your society, it's the entire Western society. To tell you what is the solution, I don't like to talk about solution because I'm not a politician. But one solution, and we already see it in Europe.
Protest.
No, protest is masturbation. And masturbation is a great thing. I've tried it once. It was incredible. It was incredible. It was so good that I want to do it once again, but I'm afraid that I'll get addicted, you know. But definitely, masturbation, I never done it in public. The left taught us to masturbate in public. No. 2 things that we could do. First, to celebrate the First Amendment. To start to say what we think and feel. This is very scary for the elite and particularly to the Jews who imposed political correctness on us. But what we see in Europe, I lost all my... This is not a dance, it's a... I definitely had, here they are. What we see in Europe is, especially in France, the people here start to develop a new class awareness. A new class awareness. The people here, and the left is here. The people here are very worried about it. They use the socialist government, Hollande.
Would that be Marine Le Pen?
Not actually. I refer here to the big scandal around Dieudonné, for instance. One of the biggest heroes in France is a black comedian called Dieudonné Mabla Mabla. And Dieudonné, he came up with the Canel. He said, "I'm black." He was the hero of the left. He was the hero of the Jews. He said, "I'm black, and guess what? I don't want to talk about the fucking Holocaust anymore. Because I'm black, and for 400 years, I'm subject to discrimination, slavery, you name it." Once he came up with that, they made him into a Holocaust denier. The socialist government went after him. They started to cancel his gig, his concert, his performance, banned him, and the entire underclass stood up for him. It became very clear that this shawish, the socialist government, started to abolish democracy in France. Once these people start to develop awareness, the people who run the show would say, maybe democracy is not the right thing, because after, at the end of the day, these people are quite stupid, we are quite clever. Are we going to let them run the show? The only way I see to deal with these issues, to deal with these issues, sliced society, and to close this devastating partitioning, is to start to develop a grand narrative of collectivism. Instead, 30 years ago, when I would ask American, "Where are you from?" I'm American, I'm from Boston. Now you ask American, "Where are you from?" He said, "Oh, my mother came from Liberia, my father is Russian." They cut you into infinitesimal units. The only way to deal with it is to go back to be Scottish, British, French, American, to be a big part of a big collective. And this is the biggest fear of the left and the Jews. And why? And why? Because the left, and this is the old left as well, despises the working class. And why? Because the working class has never brought the revolution. And you know why? Because for a working class person, it's much easier to identify with the flag. If you identify with the flag, you landed on the moon, you've been in Omaha Beach, you won in wars, you killed 3 million Vietnamese. What do you get from the left? A banner? To go in front of an idiotic factory for no reason and achieving nothing? This left problem with working class is something that we see all through the 20th century. If you go back and you read Gramsci, Frankfurt School, they were always bothered by the fact that the left never managed to bond with the working class. You look in England, Guardian, who reads the Guardian? The working class read the Sun. It's fucking bourgeoisie is reading the Guardian. New Yorkers, New York Times. The Jews also have a problem with working class because it is always working class that destroyed the Jews. This is why we see a unique bond between the Jews and the left. And this is why we break society into identity groups. So instead of working class, we have gays, the Muslim, the black, the sectarian wars. American people are abused. You cannot get anywhere. You are left with no dissent. Nobody represents you. This is very frightening.